This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is Thursday. It's July 27, 2023. First story I want to cover today is this report that's coming out on the basically Biden Green Boondoggle. Politicals reporting Biden's climate deal still has an enormous hole. Yeah, really? Okay, so what they found is that it's been about a year that they had passed this Inflation Reduction Act, which certainly has not reduced inflation. Federal Reserve just raised interest rates. We'll cover that in a minute. But the U.S. needs thousands of miles of new transmission lines to support the planned deluge of solar and wind projects. It could take a decade or more to get a transmission line through all the permitting hoops, and years of vows by lawmakers of both parties have failed to make the process any faster. Now, this is ridiculous. I mean, I've been saying this for years. Is the grid of the United States is set up for hydrocarbon fuels. It's not set up for intermittent fuels like solar and wind. They require batteries to store. The sun doesn't shine all the time. It rains. And we have a thing called night. It's dark because the sun's not in the sky. It's hard for the left to understand these concepts. So we have to have hydrocarbon backups, which make the system entirely more complicated. And putting these grids in place is like putting an oil refinery in place. People don't want them in their backyards. So where are you going to put them? You need to have these long-range transmission lines, but they get mired in regulations. They're hard to get in place, and then it's a much more complicated system. So the idea that this is going to be a simple transition to wind and solar is a joke. The studies that have been mandated on this constantly address the issue that the political barriers are almost as important as the technological barriers. And you can't just immediately say, well, we're now all going to go to solar, we're going to all go to wind. It just doesn't work. And the hydrocarbon fuels, which are immediately combustible, don't have to be stored in a battery, are natural fuels. They're not fossil fuels. They're made naturally in the earth. And Chris, if you show my book, I want to comment upon the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change. The truth is, this is all a hoax. The entire thing we've been facing with climate change is a hoax. I just got a little small book. I'm constantly, if you see behind me, these are all real books. I mean, books have been my passion all my life. It's not a very big book. The Great Lie. It's by Lynn Balzer, right there, Lynn Balzer. It's there we go, Exposing the Great Climate Lie. But what it has is it's got some nice little 1 or 2 page things about why it doesn't work. Wind power is neither green nor sustainable. I've been told repeatedly by the media and magazines, TV, the internet, that electricity produced by the wind industry is clean, essentially free energy, better for the environment than the traditional sources such as coal and natural gas. None of these claims are true. These wind installations injure, maim, and kill hundreds of thousands of birds and bats each year. I think they're also now increasing evidence they're killing whales, wind farms, and the construction of an offshore wind farm about 15 miles off the coast of Massachusetts is underway. The foundation for pieces of the large wind turbines called monopiles are being driven into the seafloor by pile drivers. Pile driving noise can deafen, injure, or even kill marine mammals. At least 14 dying humpback whales have recently been washed up in the beaches in this area. The people building these projects are fully aware of the damage to marine life that they are causing and will cause. Although killing such creatures is illegal, these companies have been given special permission by the government to injure or kill up to hundreds of whales and thousands of other marine animals, especially dolphins. It is hard to see how this is going to be, compliant under present laws like the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Endangered Species Act. Well, they don't care. It's not really about efficient energy. It's about killing capitalism. We use hydrocarbon fuels as the fuel and the energy of our industrial societies, and these people don't want industrial society. They're also depopulationists. That's what my book shows, and the Malthusians have taken over the movement and figured if they can scare people about the climate, don't stop using hydrocarbon fuels, we're all going to die because it's going to be too warm, then they can shut down capitalism. Better than the workers of the world revolting, which they didn't do either. None of these ideas work. A huge amount of carbon dioxide is generated in manufacturing, transporting, and installing wind turbines. The foundation of just one industrial wind turbine contains over 500 cubic meters of concrete, emitting 624,000 kilograms, 1,372,000 pounds of carbon dioxide to produce. It doesn't include the carbon dioxide emitted from transporting this concrete to the job site. Fact reveals the hypocrisy of those who claim that wind turbines are good for the environment, considering the number of animals these monstrosities kill and the pollution caused during their manufacture. How could anyone who truly cares about the environment approve of their use? They're talking about as wind industry has grown, so is the demand for neodymium, which would increase by as much as 700% in the next few years. That's another ingredient that goes into producing these wind turbines. It's the whole thing is a monstrosity. It's a bad idea, and it won't work. We're going to spend billions of dollars on it, and someday it's going to be looked at as one of the greatest hoaxes in human history, that people got convinced that carbon dioxide, which we exhale, which trees, as tree food, trees absorb carbon dioxide. We're really worried about the problem. We would plant more trees. But that's too simple for these people because they want to have this elaborate idea of how we need to destroy capitalism because it's so evil. It is truly insanity. How are we going to support 8 billion people in the world? Well, we don't need 8 billion people. How many do we need? Oh, maybe 500,000, including you, right? Yes, they always include themselves. All right, next story. The Federal Reserve has increased the interest rates to the highest level in 22 years. They did that yesterday. Now, it's interesting. If you go on the Wall Street Journal, look today on the Wall Street Journal, which I did, despite not liking the newspaper very much anymore. I don't think, let's see what's covered I don't recall this getting a lot of coverage. They don't want to cover this story. Okay, so the Wall Street Journal is about how the U.S. economy grew 2.4%, how the Ukrainian drones are taking out Russian tanks, about how ECB, this is a good one. No, that's first smart gun is coming to market. Will anyone buy it? It has facial recognition, software, finger, all kinds of sensors, so only you can use the gun. They like that. And then there's nothing on the front page here that I see at all on the internet about the Fed raising rates. McConnell, in fact, he yesterday froze up at a press conference and had to be walked off. I guess he's finally showing that he's probably shouldn't have been there for 20 years. Okay, so the rates now are going to 5.25 to 5.5, which is the highest in 22 years. The Fed is causing a recession intentionally. And again, that's the point I cover in the book on the coming global crash we're causing. It's going to cause a gold rush. And I was on Coast to Coast AM this week or last week on talking about that. I was really pleased to get the opportunity to go back on that show. But if you take a look at our homepage at The Truth Central and dial that number, you can talk to Swiss America and get a free book. And I would encourage you to do so. If we get a little bit deeper, let's just see gold today. Gold is, what's the gold price today? Gold price is up $1,968. It was down a little bit from yesterday, but gold has been up again. I think as these rates are now getting up to 6%, 7%, you're going to start seeing gold rise. The economy is just now slowing down, and we're still pumping huge amounts of money and deficit spending into the economy, billions and billions of dollars. And they're still sending more to Ukraine, which I think is ridiculous. By the way, I think RFK Jr. did very well in that debate with Hannity the other day. And Hannity looked pretty foolish trying to maintain his, we've really got to support Ukraine going against Russia. He knew nothing. RFK knows the history. He's talking about this Victoria Nuland, who's in the State Department, and she's been one of the main pushers of expanding NATO. We've expanded NATO right to the border, really, of Russia. And we get Sweden and Ukraine in NATO. It's almost an act of war, because NATO was organized at the Cold War. George Kennan, who was one of our greatest of State Department ambassadors, at the end of World War II, came up with a policy to contain Russia. It was containment policy. We're going to hold Russia so it doesn't expand beyond what Franklin Roosevelt gave away at Yalta. Franklin Roosevelt let Russia get into Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland. They all became communist. They were buffer zones for Russia against invasion from Western Europe, which has been going on for centuries. Napoleon invaded Russia. I mean, people don't understand, these are classic state issues, geopolitical issues that don't go away. And George Kennan, when it came up to the idea of expanding NATO, advised against it. He said, if you expand NATO to the border of Russia, you'll have war with Russia. Now, George Kennan was right. And Victoria Nuland and these Democrats evidently want war with Russia. They hate Russia after Russia no longer became communist in the fall of the Berlin Wall. The Democrats haven't forgiven Russia for that. The Democrats themselves are a neo-Marxist party. So the idea of expanding it, in one of the next stories I want to cover, which is that this Russian counteroffensive is really not working. The idea that Ukraine is succeeding is not happening. What they're doing is they're losing constantly. This Zelensky says we don't have enough ammo. We need more weapons. We need F-16s. It's a great way to steal money, and it's a great boondoggle for the arms manufacturers who are getting their payday, just like the pharmaceutical companies got their payday in COVID. So this game is on. Supply them with more equipment, spend more money on arms, and all you're doing is destroying Ukraine. Russia doesn't care. Russia wants the geopolitical advantage of holding Ukraine as a Russian territory. It was part of Russia for a long time. And it's Russia's access to the Atlantic through the Mediterranean, through the Black Sea. Russia's not going to let go of Sevastopol, which is their port, or Crimea. These are two strategic points. And what's happening is that these troops that Ukraine is putting into the field aren't trained. So Russian strikes are wiping out military equipment at a much higher pace than expected. Big surprise. I mean, our military is probably more capable right now, I constantly say, of conducting a transgender parade down Fifth Avenue than fighting a war. We've got all this equipment. We left all this equipment in Afghanistan when we abandoned Afghanistan. But another Biden failure. So the Russian media is reporting new estimates on Tuesday, citing the head of this Donetsk region, which is the region in the east that is all Russian, the Ukrainian forces have lost about 30% of their foreign supplied weaponry and equipment on the front lines. Whereas the Western headlines are constantly optimistic, pro-Kiev, euphoria, repeating how well we're doing, we're fighting Russia. But the reality is that there is a grim picture of the destruction being done in Ukraine, and the Russians are now in heavily defended positions. So the counteroffensive is going to fail. And Putin is right. They're taking out a record amount. All they're doing is getting a field day of learning how to defeat our best weaponry. And meanwhile, they've got Iranian drones, and Russia does. And what some of these articles are pointing out is that you're seeing increasingly less coverage of Ukraine on the front page, the New York Times, the Washington Post, because they don't have victories to celebrate. This is an ideological war that the left wants to wage against Russia. I mean, I'm not saying Putin's a great guy, but at the same time, Russia has nation-state interests, equally as we did in the Cuban Missile Crisis when Khrushchev tried to put nuclear missiles in Cuba. Well, Jack Kennedy didn't take too well to that. And of course, our Pentagon wanted to go to World War against Russia. That was our Curtis LeMay in that whole episode. Curtis LeMay bombed Japan, firebombed Dresden in World War II, and was desperate to go to war with Russia. At any rate, this is insanity. The war is not necessary. Russia would have easily made agreements, and several of the agreements, Robert Kennedy pointed this up, several of the agreements that Trump had in the works with Putin on Ukraine were ripped up the minute Trump was out of the White House. So we put these three stories together. We're spending all this money on green energy, which won't work. We're supporting a war of Ukraine fighting Russia, which is extremely dangerous, could go to a nuclear war. Russia's got nukes now in Belarus, and it won't work. And the Federal Reserve is increasing interest rates to put us into a recession. Now, if this isn't the dumbest set of policies I've ever seen, or else someone is trying intentionally to destroy the United States, which I believe is probably the case. I mean, why would you do all these ridiculous policies? Forget green energy, park it away. Let's use hydrocarbon fuels and have a productive economy. Stop spending all these billions of dollars that we don't have on wars that we shouldn't be fighting, and get the economy back in shape so we have lower interest rates naturally because the economy is productive. We've got 100 million people who are out of the labor force because we shipped the jobs overseas that many of those people would do. I mean, we're counterproductive policies. You can either say these are intended to destroy the country, and that's what I think this hard left, this neo-Marxism is all about. Hatred of the United States and a resentment that we have been successful as the largest industrial nation in the world, the most productive, and why don't we spread that wealth to the rest of the world? If we did it, others can do it. Chris, you want to comment?
Well, that's apparently the plan here. Follow the money. That's what they always say. But you're kind of wheeling it all together. You see a lot of the people in Congress. They make a lot of money off these green investments. We know what happened during the Obama era, throwing money into his buddies, and I'll refer to Solandra.
Right, Solandra.
A horrible failure. We see abandoned solar farms all over the place, but nobody talks about that as well, as long as somebody's making money. The question is, who's making money off of these the rising death toll in Ukraine? That's an issue we're talking about, because we're clearly losing this. I understand the whole premise of not allowing Russia to move forward, but I'll say it, the deep state's fault for installing somebody into office who allowed this, and who Vladimir Putin knew was weak enough to allow this invasion. and now it's going to get. It could only get worse.
Well, I don't think Biden's actually running anything. I think I still suspect it's Obama behind the scenes who's pulling the levers. And we're not. The story is also going to drop out about the chef who died,
Right.
and in Martha's Vineyard, and
I still believe that Obama's the face and somebody else is pulling those levers.
that's a possibility too. I mean, again, the problem is we have gotten to a point where the World Economic Forum, these multinational companies, which have always kind of wanted to get together and rule the world, it was the Hitler idea from the beginning, World War II, that Nazism was socialist. He was the first to have universal health care and paid vacations by the government and, things of that nature, but all socialist programs so the people wouldn't complain too much while the money was being made by the oligarchs who owned the big companies. And, that's again was power concentrating in a small oligarchy and the majority of people being dispensable. So we fight World War II and lose all these millions of people who cares? They don't care. They think they weren't necessary anyway. All they did was
the World Economic Forum refers to all these poor people who are suffering as useless eaters. That's what they think.
Well, that's what that was the communist idea of the people. They're really useless eaters because they're not productive. They're just consumers. They don't see people as having, it always amazes me thinking about, New York City. Well, this place would be great if it weren't so many people. Wait a minute. What makes it great is the people. Without the people, it's a fairly boring place.
True, but they keep putting the same people in office. So they're watching their cities in demise, and they're still voting for the same people.
Well, we'll cover that in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going. Let's get to the next story here, which is Hunter Biden. And this was amazing yesterday. Hunter Biden went to court, and he thought he had a sweetheart deal. And when he got to court, he found that this was a Trump-appointed judge, and she wasn't her judge. It was Judge Maryellen Noreika, Noreika. Noreika. How would you say that, Chris? Noreika? I'm not sure.
It was Noreika.
Noreika?
Yeah, she wasn't having any of this.
No, she had none
of it. Doing their job. Amazing.
Yeah. Well, okay. So what she said was, she started out by saying, asked a few questions. She said, "Well, what does this plea deal mean? In other words, can he still be charged with?" And then she started asking questions about, the Federal Agents Registration Act, FARA, F-A-R-A. And so I don't really understand the scope of the agreement. That's what Noreika said. She noted that Biden has had numerous foreign business deals. At one point, she raised a hypothetical on whether Biden could be charged as acting as an unregistered foreign agent under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Well, what happened is the prosecutors didn't have good answers for these questions. So Lee Wise, a U.S. attorney, assistant U.S. attorney representing the government at the hearing, said Biden could still be charged with a FARA violation. Of course he could. They weren't going to do it. They were going to give him this hand slap and immunity, and then later, after he got the immunity, say, well, it applied to everything. But the way it was written, it doesn't apply to everything. It would probably just apply to what he was pleading guilty to. That was probably the only limited immunity he got. But at any rate, Noreika said the prosecutors and defense lawyers they asked them to resolve this about the plea deal. She adjourned the hearing. When the hearing resumed, Wise and Clark said that they were in agreement that the non-prosecution aspects of the deal will be limited only to the tax violations, drug offenses, and a firearm violation during the years 2014 to 2019. Biden can still be charged for crimes outside the scope of the deal. Now, see, that's what I would have suspected. When you get an immunity deal in regards to a plea deal, they're just saying, okay, plead guilty to these charges on these crimes, and then you got immunity on those crimes from further prosecution. Otherwise, they would, that's why you pleaded guilty, to make it go away for a lesser penalty. Okay, and the government agrees. we'll do that because we want you on the record that you were guilty for these things. But it doesn't apply to anything else you might have done. That immunity. It's not a blanket immunity over your whole life. It's not a blanket immunity over all the women he abused, all the drugs he did, all the foreign deals he did, not registering. I mean, this guy has probably committed, I don't know how many crimes, but the judge is not putting up with it. Now, what the situation is, again, you're not going to find this let's see what the New York Times is covering today. I'm sure this is right on the front page of the New York Times. Let me just check and make sure it's there. Hold on, let's see what's here. In New York Times, U.S. economy grew at 2.4% second quarter. That's the top story. Second story, shortages in workers. We need more workers in the public sector. Okay. Then there's a little thing here. Today's top news, the Federal Reserve raises rates to a 22-year high. They covered it, but it's not a top headline. So they buried it into the page. And, of course, they have here Russia bombards southern Ukraine, trying to keep Kiev's advance at bay. So they're still touting the war. And, this is again, biased news. They're not covering the news. There's nothing, I'm trying to find anything here about Hunter Biden. No, we don't have any Hunter Biden on the New York Times front page. Funny. I thought that'd be a pretty big story. I guess they don't think so. Nope, nothing. Let's see, when McConnell suffered an episode, they cover that. Yeah, they covered Sinead O'Connor. They covered no Hunter Biden. Didn't happen. Reading the New York Times didn't happen. Okay, now what are the implications of this? What does it really mean? What it means to me is that Hunter Biden left there, and now the Justice Department has been called on the carpet by this judge, and the pressure is mounting for a serious investigation of the Biden family. And this is more pressure on Joe Biden with the whistleblowers and all the rest to come clean. Now, I don't know that it's ultimately going to result in indictments because this Department of Justice is as corrupt as the rest of the government. And I'm in favor of moving the entire government to the Death Valley and get rid of it. Okay, now one more story I want to cover, and that is that this woman in San Francisco, which is another Democratic hellhole, in deep decline. You've got homelessness, you've got feces on the street, human feces, drug needles. Police aren't enforcing the drug laws, so you've got drug dealers moving in there for a quick kill. And quick kill it will be with their fentanyl, which is not being stopped at the border. So we have a naked woman who got out of her car with a gun and started shooting at motorists. And this is normal in San Francisco. In San Francisco, tenderloin don't have to wear clothes. Not required. Besides, this is where a lot of the LGBT was the headquarters of LGBT for long. This in Greenwich Village. They're real trendy places. San Francisco was a beautiful city, but now it's in deep decline, and it's going to be leading the collapse of cities, which will be part of this great global crash we're going to go into. Because what's going to happen is that these commercial real estate buildings are going to come up for renewal of their leases or renewal of their mortgages. And the banks are going to say the building's not worth what it used to be because it's largely vacant. Most of our downtowns have an enormous amount of vacant office space. People are not coming back to work after the pandemic. They're working from their homes electronically. And business is beginning to decline, and companies are beginning to lay off workers. So you have a situation where the banks are going to have to take a loss. We're even seeing some corporations walk away from their mortgages in these buildings because they're so underwater, they'll just let them default. They're not going to pour more money into a lease that's not sustainable. And now you've got this naked woman with a gun. Well, the police came and got her and put her in an ambulance and took her to a hospital. And clearly, there's a psychiatric issue here. But the point is, in San Francisco, bizarreness is the norm, and the city is completely out of control. And when you look at the ideas, how these ideas work out, defund the police. Let's have gender indecisions. Change your gender. Let's have social justice, where we say that everything is racist. The newspaper is racist. The dog is racist. Everything is racist. It's ridiculous. But this insanity is what has been constructed in the neo-Marxist world we're living in. And I've been trying to run programs here. We'll do more on this whole idea of postmodernism. We'll cover Baudrillard and various other of these authors and try to explain to you how we got here, because these authors deny that there is objective reality. They think everything is subjective reality. They want us to imagine a world which is their perfect creation. And I'm going to really explore what the depth of what they're doing is. It'll be my new book, which is coming. It's in press right now, on this neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. What it results in is anarchy. What you're seeing in San Francisco is the beginning of anarchy. It's going to be a dangerous place to be. And it's not only commercial real estate, but with interest rates continuing to rise, the Fed is admitting it can't control inflation. And mortgages are going to start going up again. Fixed mortgages are now going to start being more than 7%, 30-year fixed mortgages, which is going to make buying a house unaffordable for a great number of people. Chris, any final comments before we wrap up for today?
And just to note on the shooter in San Francisco, a lot of these places are happening in something called no-gun zones, or major cities where there are very, very strict gun laws. This is because the criminals know that any potential victim, for the most part, is not going to have a weapon and will not be able to fight back.
Yeah, well, in New York, you get random attacks. Somebody just walking along the street decides to, start beating somebody. Somebody in a subway platform pushes somebody into the train.
No gun zone right there. Absolutely no gun zone there in New York City.
And, the police are quitting the New York Police Department in droves because they're operating under a dangerous situation. If they dare take a black man into custody and something happens to the guy, gave another George Floyd incident, their career is over. They'll probably be charged with a crime, probably charged with murder or manslaughter if the guy dies. Well, what cop is going to really risk their careers or their life trying to go after someone if there are this kind of consequences?
They have families too. They really they need to take care of their own too. And it's you can't put yourself in a position where you're going to be tossed in jail for doing your job anymore.
And let's say they, why bother going after the drugs? They arrest somebody, within 24 hours, they're back on the street doing drugs again. And, so it's pointless. This is the problem, that you cannot have a society that has defund the police as its primary motive. I mean, that message is interpreted immediately by criminal mentalities as saying, you are welcome here. Please come here. No one will bother you here. And once people are committing major crimes and being let out of prison, it's a solid message to those who are criminally insane and violently criminally insane that there's going to be no punishment. And so they have a license to engage in their sickness.
And we could take this a step further. Good Samaritans are having their names dragged through the mud and being arrested, tried, and even jailed for protecting others.
Our Department of Justice takes a whistleblower and prosecutes the whistleblower.
Right. They're protecting the corrupt, they're protecting the criminals, and they're doing it just to gain popularity and votes.
And meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, and now even the New York Times, all of our they publish happy news.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's another thing. 2.3% growth as good, or 2.4% growth as good news. This is, of course, post-COVID. We can talk about that, and high inflation. So those numbers are, in fact, stacked. The thing is, though, I remember Barack
It's
Obama.
called stagflation. This is a
Right.
stagnation and inflation. That's what we're going into.
Well, Obama said when he was president, the days of 3% growth are over. Well, that didn't happen when under Trump, we had 3% plus growth. And then we go back to under 3%, and the New York Times reports this as wonderful news. That's an issue.
Yeah, then you get in your electric vehicle and find that the thing won't move and the heat.
You got to wind the key.
I mean, put a wind turbine in your backyard.
We're going to have those Flintstone cars when if they have their way, because pretty soon electricity will be dirty enough where you have to run the car on your feet.
And then we'll pass a bunch of regulations. You have to eat bugs. You can't have a washing machine.
Mealworms.
You have to, all your appliances are using too much carbon dioxide, emitting too much carbon dioxide, and we can't have fertilizer anymore because nitrous oxide is harmful as a greenhouse gas. So therefore we have to quit using nitrogen fertilizers, which will mean we produce less food. That's right. But that's okay. We don't need those farms anyway.
No, not at all. Food comes from the store and the 3D printer pretty soon.
Okay. This insanity is got to stop. And the only reason it will stop is because it will produce failures that ultimately people can't tolerate. At some point or other, enough mothers are going to be tired of their children being made into perverts that they're going to close down the public schools. And when we do, we might have some progress being made. But until then, the Marxist Teachers Union will continue to rule it, and they'll produce mathematics, which teaches critical race theory rather than multiplication. Okay, Chris, it's a world that when you go down this direction, this is a civilization in decline. And unfortunately, we're seeing that. Now, in the end, God always wins, and God will win here too. I'll constantly maintain that. God will win. But join me in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14. Let's get down on our knees and let's beg God to forgive us for allowing things to get to this point. Taking God out of the schools in the 1940s was a bad idea. Taking God out of the public square, allowing Satan to be in the public square, that's okay. Well, that's wrong. That's not okay. It's not according to God's law. And civilizations that have decided not to follow God's law don't end up very well. And we could have another world war. With the thermonuclear capacity we have, there will not be hundreds of millions killed this time. There will be billions. So let's pray that God will heal our land, because one way or the other, he'll solve the problem. Thanks for putting that up, Chris. You can get the Gold Rush book by calling that 800 number, toll free. The book is free. You'll talk to Swiss America, which I encourage you to do. My Vital C, my hair has gotten color back again. I'm podcasting and writing. Take a look at this My Vital C. It really does work. And I'm writing books like crazy these days, and we'll have a book on this as well coming out very soon. And My Vital C is a miracle molecule, carbon 60. And I encourage everybody to give it. It comes for pets, and pets like it. You don't see any dogs worrying about their gender. Only people are crazy enough to do that. Okay, in the end, God always wins. Thank you for joining us. Today is Thursday. It's July 27th, 2023. We'll be back tomorrow. God bless.